We are going to talk about, and what we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes is what can I do with a major in political science or international politics? So to introduce myself, my name is Lauren Grenice. I'm the assistant director and a career coach within the Liberal Arts Career Enrichment Network. And we also have with us today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Lapatina. I am the network assistant here at the Career Enrichment Network, and I'm also a fourth-year political science student, and I'll be graduating in the spring. So very sad.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maddie. I really appreciate you being here, especially because Maddie has some awesome experiences that she's going to talk about today as well. All right. So with that, let's kind of just dive right in. So as a quick overview, I always start my presentations with an overview. We're going to talk about the versatility and the values that go along with political science and international politics. And then the decision of every upcoming graduating senior or even student, like even if you were an upperclassman or a lowerclassman, thinking about where you want to go post-graduation, if that's a full-time position, if that's a gap year, grad school, law school. And then we're going to really dive into related career fields. So we have a lot of information, so don't worry, this presentation will be recorded. So you can always look back on this later on our YouTube channel. And then we'll talk about, or Maddie will talk about what employers are looking for and share a little bit of her story. And then we'll open it up for questions. But at the same time, you can please feel free to ask any questions by typing them in the chat or the Q&A as we go along. And as they come up, I'll be monitoring it and we can definitely answer any questions that you have. Okay. All right, so to start out, I really want to just acknowledge the versatility and the values that go along with international politics and political science. So if you all wouldn't mind, I'm wondering what inspired you all to study international politics or political science. So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. And while everyone is doing that, we did get a question that came in the Q&A to make the slide deck available for attendees. Yes, I will send that out to all of you afterwards as well. All right, military service, prospect of changing the world, good. Public service. I'm seeing a lot of public service in here. Good. Law, advocacy, okay. Yeah, so when Maddie and I were having a conversation about this earlier this week, that's actually one of the things that we talked about in the decision to study political science or international politics. I also see foreign service officer as a dream job to make a difference in that way in the chat. And so when it comes to thinking about the why behind what we decide to study. Hopefully that comes from your just general interest in the topic. But what I found in talking with political science and international politics majors is a lot of those interests come from this idea that you want to be an agent for change and a leader within society. You want to advocate and serve the public and in the various ways that you can do so. And the reason why I bring this up, and I could talk about this for a whole nother 45 minutes, but the reason why I bring this up is because eventually when you are asked in an interview or when you're applying for fellowships or internships or full-time jobs, grad school, law school, you're going to have to answer that question about your why. So what is driving you towards this specific area and why do you want to serve others? What do you value in being that agent for change within society, whether local, state, national, or international? So with this in mind, I kind of want you to capture these values of being that agent for change, thinking about advocacy, and that desire for public service in whichever career field you choose, and allow that to be your core in driving you forward, in moving you forward, and motivating you, and persisting through obstacles that you might come across when it comes to, attending law school or working within difficult situations. and relying on mentors in those different areas. So with that said, I always like to just start with that kind of reflection of values. We then have a decision that we need to make, right? Like, I know that not all of you are graduating students this semester, but even so, thinking about the decision of what you want to do after school can be very overwhelming and exciting at the same time. So typically what we see are students within these different areas. There's kind of 4 career paths that you can choose going forward. Law school is a pretty common one for political science and international politics majors. We also see a lot of students who are interested in going to grad school, maybe for a master's of public administration or public policy, strategic communications, those different types of things, national security. Then there's full-time work, which we're going to dive very deep into in just a second, as well as taking a gap year. So maybe you're not quite sure if you want to attend law school or grad school quite yet, and you're using that gap year as a intentional exploration. So just to normalize this process a little bit, we know that only about 1/3 of law students nationwide go straight from college into law school. So a majority don't go right away. They take that gap year, that intentional gap year. And the average age for graduate students in the United States is actually 33 years old. So a majority of people are not attending graduate school directly after undergrad. And that 90% of students who take that intentional gap year might return to college within a year. And there's a whole host of reasons why people choose these different pathways when they choose them, whether that's right for their career or what's going on outside in their personal life. But I think that this, and the reason why I put this slide up is, again, because it kind of just normalizes that process, that if you're not sure, know that grad school and law school are always going to be there. They're not going anywhere. And a lot of times, some employers will actually pay for you to go back to school later on, which is kind of cool, to gain experiences in that and then bring them back into the workplace, which is really nice. So we won't be talking a lot today about law school or grad school, but we're going to focus, or gap years, we're going to focus more on that full-time of what can I do full-time after I graduate with my degree in political science or international politics. With that said, though, today on Instagram, we're focusing on law school. I have a lot of different resources for you all that I will also be sending out with the slide deck after this presentation. And we're also focusing on grad school tomorrow on our Instagram reels as well. So just follow along for more information with that. So with all of that said, let's now kind of dive directly into all of the different areas that you could potentially go into with a political science or international politics degree. As you can see, we're going to go into each of these 7 areas pretty in depth. But with that said, as you can see, there is a lot of variety of what you can do, connecting it back to this core idea that you want to serve others, that you want to advocate for a certain cause or a certain mission that you have, or something congruent with your own values, and be an agent for change within local, unity level, state level, national level, international level. So these 7 areas are local, state, and federal government, which we're going to do first. Then we'll review going into politics and some tips to do that. International affairs and relations, advocacy and nonprofit work, business communications, and then finally education. Okay. So to start off, we have local, state, and federal government as your first, as this first kind of option. A lot of people, when you think about political science and international politics, we connect it to the government, right? Because we have these governing bodies in society that create systems and create organization. And you can do this in so many different types of way to help different communities, to help people at different levels. So at the local and state government level, there are so many different areas that you can go into. So there's going into public policy making, urban planning. You could go into city management or town management, going into program administration or social services, law enforcement. At the federal government, you're going to see this mirrored just at a larger level. So you can go into public policy, research, intelligence, foreign service, general services. So that like systemic administration and program administration from a higher level. So to put this into a little bit more context at the local and state government level, we have a lot of different employers that you can work with. These include counties, cities, municipalities, school districts, Department of State government, legislative agencies, different court systems. And the tips that we know and the strategies that you can take to go into these local and state areas is to go directly to the source and do a targeted search. So going directly to the Pennsylvania state government site and see what jobs and opportunities are there, or if they have specific courts at a local level that you want to be involved with, doing some research on that and making connections. In the government, whether local, state, federal, or international, at the international level, it is incredibly important to network. One of the events that we have coming up in mid-March is our virtual Learn and Network in DC event with alumni. Use the Penn State alumni system to network with those who are currently living and working in whatever area of government that you're interested in. Doing those informational interviews can be really helpful. It's also incredibly helpful to expose yourself to these areas and see if you like them. So getting involved with civic organizations and different events, or participating in local and state election campaigns, those are different ways to kind of test out if you like this area and if you want to pursue it. Because if, say, you have an internship at the local or state level and you love it, that's great. That means that you can continue down that path. But if not, that's also great, because that means that you can pivot and think about, okay, how have the skills that I built transferred to different areas in what I'm interested in. For federal government, the same type of tips apply, where seeking leadership roles in relevant campus organizations and networking is going to be incredibly important. It can also be very helpful to think about participating in study abroad or education abroad, or acquiring a different language to make yourself more marketable. I won't go in depth a lot with the federal government because, one, there are over 170 federal departments and agencies that you could potentially work for. There are a lot. GoGovernment.org is a fantastic site. I think it's through the Partnership of Public Service that it breaks down all of these 170 different federal departments and organizations that you can work for and give you tips on how to apply. But like I said, this afternoon at 4:15, we have an alum coming from who works at the General Services Administration in the federal government to talk about how to get a job within the federal government. So if you haven't registered for this, I highly recommend to do so, going on our website, or it will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel later, and you can view that as well, and then network with her afterwards, okay? So to kind of solidify this, I have a couple of alumni examples that I would love to show you. So first, here we have George, who is the special assistant in the office of the secretary for the U.S. Department of State. So he's working at that federal level, and he graduated in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in political science, or sorry, not Department of State, the Department of Health and Human Services. And he was involved in UPUA and the Latino caucus while he was here. which is pretty incredible. So gaining those skills and experiences. Then we have Brandon, who's working at the state level for the Department of Human Services of Pennsylvania, and he's their press secretary, and he received his degree in international affairs and relations. On LinkedIn, if you go to the Penn State People search, you can search all 500,000 plus alumni who are on LinkedIn and begin to network with them. This will be really important in just starting to build that support network within, especially if you're interested in going into federal government, state government, or local government positions. And then finally, we have Ashley, who is at the local level. So she is the HR program manager at the city of San Diego. And she graduated with her bachelor's degree in 2016 in political science and a second bachelor's in media studies. So you can see she also then went on to get her master's of public administration. But you can see how these, if you're thinking about these skills and things that you've gained inside the classroom, thinking about, okay, what can propel me into the different areas of how I want to be an agent for change in my local, state, national, or international levels, how I want to advocate for missions and values that I feel are important, and how I want to serve those in society, in the public, okay? All right, so that was our first area. Our second area is another big one. So this is the area of politics. So different areas that you could potentially go into if you are interested in more of these leadership positions within politics include elected and appointed leadership. So you could run for office, which is really exciting. Campaign management, special interest advocacy, lobbying, political action committees, public policy, government relations. Some of the different employers that are connected with these areas include employers like the national, state, local government, specific political parties that you affiliate yourself with, different lobbying organizations, advocacy organizations, third-party organizations that work with the federal government. So in thinking about this and in thinking about this area, again, networking and exposing yourself to sources like networking and exposing yourself to sources like Wendy Stoner, who's coming in this afternoon to talk about how to get a job with the federal government, networking with alumni like her, and also getting yourself involved in some of these campaigns, local campaigns, getting yourself involved in student government if you're interested in politics, or even at a leadership level of a specific maybe nonprofit organization or advocacy organization of your choice that you might be affiliated with. Will definitely help you. So as an example, we have Taylor here, who's a legislative assistant for the United States House of Representatives, and she also serves on the Senate Black Legislative Staff Caucus, which is pretty awesome. And she graduated with her degrees from Penn State in 2016 with political science and then African studies. We also have Taylor here, who is the communications director at the House Agricultural Committee Republicans. And so she works, and I believe previously she was directly associated with the House of Representatives. And she graduated in 2015 with international politics and had a concentration in international relations and a minor in history. So you can see how versatile your degree is in just some of these few examples that we've had so far. So the third area is international affairs and relations. So here we're kind of expanding our reach outside of the local, state, federal government, outside of the world of politics and how you want to influence. And we're thinking about how we can be an agent for change and advocate and serve the world, really. So some of the specific areas that you can go into include diplomacy, peacekeeping, foreign affairs, community development, economic development, different resource development, policy making, political advising, ethics and anti-corruption, human rights organizations. So some of the different types of employers within these areas are a whole host of different industries. So we have intergovernmental agencies, so those agencies that work in between governments of different countries like the World Bank or the UN, national governments, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, religious organizations, policy and research orgs, private businesses. You can work for defense contractors. Honestly, finding an employer whose values align with your own is going to be really important, because the more that your values align with the values of your employer, the more meaning you are going to derive from your career. And that's what we hope for. That's what I hope for as a career coach is, okay, how can I get you a step closer to aligning those values so you are advocating for those purposes that you find vital or important, and how you can, again, be that agent for change. So as some examples, we have Amy here, who is currently an analyst of the Africa Gender Innovation Lab at the World Bank, which is pretty amazing. She graduated with a dual degree at Penn State in 2012. So these are all young alums. These are all alums that have graduated within the last 10, 11 years. And she's working with it, she graduated with International Politics and Applied French. We also have Ashley here, who's a project manager for the Obama Foundation right now, and she graduated in 2019, so not even 5 years ago, and she graduated with her bachelor's in political science. So one of the things that I highly recommend is going onto LinkedIn and viewing that alumni search, because from there you can look some of these alumni up. All of their information is public, and you can find and see what the roadmap they followed to get where they are today. So that way you don't feel like you have to trailblaze on your own, but you can follow in other people's footsteps that you align with, and even connect with them to build that support network in your professional identity. All right, so number 4 is we have advocacy and nonprofit work. So we might be moving a little bit away from the government, the legislative processes and things that you could do within leadership connected directly to government and international affairs even, and doing more of this nonprofit and advocacy work. And you can do this in so many different ways, through public relations, policy analysis, grant writing. You can work within disease and disaster relief, or in public health or economic development at a larger level, or coordinate volunteers. We have some amazing alumni who have worked for different charitable organizations, labor unions, libraries, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, humanitarian services, relief agencies. You could even look at working within the UN, or working within the federal government and volunteering for the Peace Corps, or the looking at the National Security Council, or U.S. Agency for International Development. There are a ton of different areas that you can go into. So again, just as examples, we have Gerald here, who is an alum. He graduated from Penn State in 2016 in International Relations and National Security Studies. And he works as a senior employment specialist at the International Rescue Committee, which is actually one of the organizations that our office works incredibly close with in connecting students with employers. We also have Cheryl here, who is a community organizer within Pittsburgh for a nonprofit organization, and she's graduated with political science and history in 2019. All right, so moving even a step further from that, business is always an option for you all. So we have domestic, international, and travel and tourism industries where you can go into sales, human resources, management, market research. You can work in retail, restaurants, financial institution, property management at the domestic level. At the international level, you can do all of these things as well. You can, with political science and international politics, if you wanted to go into banking and finance, you could do that. You could go into international development and real estate. You don't necessarily have to have a specific degree. You need skills. And that's what Maddie is going to be talking about in just a second. Consulting, healthcare administration, international companies such as multinational service firms or international companies that work within multiple countries, logistics firms, environmental firms, sports organizations, real estate firms, The tourism and travel areas are also huge. So working for airline services or ecotourism or lodging and restaurants, airlines, cruise lines, car rental agencies, US military, all of those have a tourism and travel component. So as an alum example, we have Michael here, who is a global mobility and immigration specialist, not for the government, but for the Walt Disney Company. Disney is a global powerhouse. That is how you can, thinking about how you can use your political science and government degree as he got in 2017. Or Anjali here, who graduated with her BA in international politics, who works as an analyst for Deloitte in consulting. So two more quick areas, and then I'm going to turn it over to Maddie in just a minute, are communications. So if you think about the ways that you can use your international and political knowledge within communications, within news, reporting, investigative journalism, photography, public relations and freelance work, working for newspapers and magazines at the local, national, international level, at public cable and private television studios, radio systems, news and foreign news agencies, labor unions. As an example, we have Stephanie here, who is a multi-platform producer and content creator for ABC News, and she graduated with her degree within political science and government. Last but not least, we have the area of education. And so some of these different areas that you could potentially go into would be higher education, writing, library services, translation, interpretation, especially if you know a different language. Teaching, you could work for K through 12 schools, you could work for a four-year college and university. You could work for non-governmental organizations, third-party study abroad providers. And as an example here, we have Matthew, who came to Penn State and stayed, who got his bachelor's degree in international relations and affairs in 2015, and now serves as the assistant director of admissions for the Penn State School of International Affairs. So I know that I kind of sped through some of that, but I really want to make sure that I'm paying attention to time and let Maddie kind of have the floor now to talk about, we talked about these big areas of different career paths that you could go into. So now Maddie's going to talk a little bit about what specifically employers are looking for from you and give you some tips.
All right, so every year, the National Association for Colleges Employers puts out a survey to employers across the country, excuse me, asking them what they look for in potential candidates. And as you can see here, these are the results of the 2022 survey. And as you can see, none of these skills point to a particular major. So there are a lot of these skills that are on here are things that you're developing in your liberal arts classes, as well as things outside the classroom. So I'm seeing a bunch on here that I know that I've used in class. So like communication skills, a lot of my classes are discussion-based classes. So obviously I'm communicating with people every day and finding ways to problem solve and take initiative in conversation. Leadership, I'm involved in a ton of orgs on campus, and I'm sure you all are too. And that's a really important skill that employers want. Some technical skills, analytical and quantitative skills, a lot of you're involved in may require that. Strong work ethic. As Penn State students, we're all strong workers. We're all involved a ton on campus. So obviously you're all developing that. Yeah, so these are a bunch of skills that employers are looking for. So these are important to highlight on your LinkedIn or on your resume and cover letter. So definitely brag about yourself if these are things that you think you're, if these are strong areas for you. Just waiting for the next slide. There we go. Okay, so kind of going off of that, things that you're learning outside of the classroom. These are all different things that I'm sure you guys are involved with one way or another. So research, if you're involved in research labs, analytical skills, you're definitely going to develop those doing that. Volunteer work, so that's things like taking initiative, leadership. Internships, there's a variety of skills you're developing depending on what type of internship you do. Part-time jobs, that's great for work ethic. If you're a student also working in a part-time job, that's a lot to manage. So time management, making sure you're balancing both your work and your schoolwork. Education abroad, that like global perspective is really important. employers love to hear about your experiences, so definitely talk about that. And student organizations and leadership, I'm sure you're all involved in a variety of different orgs on campus, so definitely talk about that in while marketing your degree. So, leadership, taking initiative, problem solving, teamwork, working with other students towards a common goal, all great skills that you're developing outside of the classroom, but while you're here at Penn State.
So I'm wondering, Maddie, so now that you've kind of talked a little bit about these transferable skills in different areas where you can develop those skills and how to highlight them, could you tell us a little bit about your own journey as you're looking to graduation in May?
Yeah, definitely. So my very first internship that I did here at Penn State was my freshman year going into sophomore year. I interned with the Center County Democratic Committee here in State College. And because it was COVID times, it was completely virtual. So it was interesting navigating that and trying to figure out how to be professional, but over Zoom and over virtual means. So that was really interesting, but it was such a great experience because I really got to build my own experience. I got to take on projects that I was interested in. So again, taking initiative, seeing things that they could do, excuse me, that they could improve upon, and bringing my student perspective and my perspective as a young person to the committee was really awesome. And then later down the line, last summer, I interned at the U.S. Department of Transportation with their public affairs area. And that was a really awesome experience. Again, I was the first intern that they had, so they didn't have an established program, which was awesome because I get to make it my own. And I got to take on projects that I was interested in. So once again, taking initiative is so important. Since it was a public affairs unit, I was working a lot with communication skills. So drafting social media posts, helping develop campaigns, finding the best ways to communicate some very technically complicated bills and programs, and trying to make it accessible for just common people who don't necessarily understand all of the complexities of law was really interesting. And I definitely saw myself kind of relying on my liberal arts education that I got here to complete those tasks. And it was a really awesome experience. So yeah, definitely make sure that you are reflecting back on your classes and things that you've learned while you're off and doing all these awesome things wherever you're doing them while you're an intern and once you graduate. And again, make sure that you're advocating for yourself and working on things that you think are going to further your career and further develop those transferable skills that we've been talking about.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie. I just have one quick follow-up question. So I'm wondering if you could share how you discovered some of these opportunities and how you went about applying for them.
Yeah, so the Center County Democratic Committee, that one I found out I was a member of the College Democrats here on campus, and they had advertised it through their meetings. They talked about it. They had the director come and speak to us, which is a really cool experience. I got to meet her in person and network and say, this is an opportunity I'm interested in. How would you suggest I go about applying? Got to talk to her and ended up getting it, which was really awesome. And then the one that I had at the Department of Transportation was through the Partnership for Public Service. They do a internship program called Future Leaders in Public Service. I learned of it, I think, through social media, but now we work pretty closely with them. We've been advertising some of their internships. So definitely check us out on our socials to do a little self-plug right there. But yeah, that was a really cool experience. It was their first year doing the program. So it was kind of like their guinea pig in a way. But it's a really awesome program. They provide stipends for students, which is super helpful, especially because they offer both in-person and virtual internships. So if you don't want to travel to DC, that's totally fine. You don't have to. But if you do, they do offer financial support for that. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So it sounds like it was like a combination of networking and like you were saying before, taking initiative and really kind of seizing on those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Taking advantage of opportunities that Penn State provides is super important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and reviewing some of those transferable skills with us. I want to kind of end with some next steps. So clearly we talked about a lot today in a very short amount of time. It's a lot of information to take in, to digest, to process. So what is next in leaving from this workshop here? The first thing that you can do is take stock, thinking about where you are currently, where you are, what are you currently doing right now as a political science or international politics student? What are you learning? What skills are you currently gaining in your extracurriculars, both inside the classroom, outside the classroom? Then also taking stock about where you've been. So thinking about what Maddie talked about with those transferable skills, what skills have you gained? Critical thinking, problem solving. If anybody's worked a part-time job in customer service, oh my goodness, the ability to deal with difficult people, having a friendly demeanor, all of those different things. Like, what are those skills that you've built so far? And then asking yourself, okay, where do I want to go from here? How do I want to be an agent for change within the government, within international affairs, as a communicator, within business? How do I want to advocate for my own values, for any mission that I connect with? How do I want to serve others? In what role do I see myself serving others? Okay. And so thinking about how these different areas that we've gone over, how are your skills congruent? So how do they align with those interests? And then asking yourself from there, what do you need to do to develop yourself further? What are the gaps in your experiences? That is kind of having that research mindset. So you're identifying a gap and kind of seizing that gap and taking initiative to fill that gap and build your resume, and thinking about how you can get the job that you want after graduation. Or if you're interested in law schools, or if you're interested in grad schools, or thinking about a gap year. These are really big questions to grapple with. I hope you all know that, knowing that our time here is kind of closing up in a couple minutes, that this is just the first step, not the last step. Please make an appointment with me, with any of the other 4 career coaches in our office, to talk about your interests, and we can help you, guide you through some of these questions and decision making, to see where you want to go, what you want to do, and how you can develop yourself again further into the person that you're kind of meant to be, rather than the person that you feel like you should be. Okay. And you can do that through making an appointment on Knitting Lion Careers. So with that, I want to open it up for questions. While if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to post in the chat or post in the Q&A. My email address, as well as Maddie's, is up here. You are more than welcome to reach out to either one of us directly to talk with Maddie directly about her experiences, talk with me through career coaching about your own interests. All right, don't see any coming in. Oh, okay. Okay, so we have a good question here. So do you know any specific tips or ideas for getting internships as a freshman or a rising sophomore? Are there any specific programs designed for underclassmen or undergraduates that you know of? Yeah, so thank you so much for the question. So Maddie, I actually kind of want, if you wouldn't mind starting, and then I can kind of finish it off.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are. I don't think anyone particularly would discriminate against a freshman, especially if you're really excited about the opportunity, definitely communicate that. I would definitely recommend checking out Nittany Lion Careers if you want. There's an option to filter it based on your class level. So if you want to look for a specific opportunity that looks specifically for freshmen or sophomores, you can definitely do that. But I would never suggest shying away from something that you're excited about just because they say that they're looking for an upperclassman. If you are passionate about it, if you're express that you are really interested in whatever the opportunity is, do not hesitate to apply. Definitely communicate that.
That's excellent advice, Maddie. Thank you. Yeah. So just to kind of continue on with that, the networking piece is going to be really huge. Especially as underclassmen, being able to join specific student organizations or professional student organizations that bring guest speakers in, kind of like similar to what Maddie's experience was with getting that first internship for her. Opening yourself up to some of those different networking opportunities, that's the hidden job market. So doing some of those targeted searches, when it comes to specific programs designed, it really just depends on the industry that you're interested in. So obviously, like, we went through a bunch of different industries, so there are specific programs for different types of those industries, different fellowships that you could be available for. But as a first or even a second year student, the best advice that I could give is just to get involved. Taking on leadership experiences within student orgs, volunteering for instance, if you're interested in the government, local, state government, election committees, or something similar, just to kind of promote that civic service, can be really helpful. But we can talk about that specifically for the student who had the question. Please make an appointment with me and we can definitely talk through that a little bit more. So thank you for the question. Great. Any other questions? That was a good one. Good one to end on. All right. So with that, if there are no other questions, this is just an announcement for other Career Week events. You can scan the QR code here too, as well, to learn more about that how to get a job with the federal government presentation that we're going to be doing this afternoon at 4:15. Like I said, it's going to be recorded, much like this one was. But tomorrow we are going to talk about, we have an Ask a Career Coach hours in the Chaikin Center for Find Out More Fridays. If you're interested in research, we have a professor in psychology who's going to talk about careers in research with bachelor's degree, not just in psychology, but all different types of majors.